In 1937, a German art dealer walked into the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam and offered them something extraordinary. A painting that no one had ever seen before, yet one that looked unmistakably like a Vermeer. The brushwork was flawless. The pigments appeared centuries old. The canvas had the precise crackle pattern of something pulled from the 17th century. Experts studied it. They debated, and then they declared it genuine, one of the greatest Vermeer discoveries in living memory. The world celebrated. Museums lined up to acquire more works from the same source. And for nearly a decade, no one suspected that every single one of those paintings had been made in a secret studio by a middling Dutch artist named Han van Meegeren. A man so insulted by critics dismissing his work that he decided to fool the entire art world out of spite. Van Meegeren is perhaps the most audacious forger in recorded history, but he is far from alone. The story of art forgery is also the story of human ambition, ego, obsession, and the extraordinary lengths that science has had to go to in order to catch up with the most sophisticated con artists the world has ever seen. Wolfgang Beltracchi did not paint like a forger, he painted like a genius. Working out of a rural studio in Germany, Beltracchi and his wife Helene spent decades producing masterpieces attributed to Max Ernst, Heinrich Campendonck, Fernand Léger, and dozens of other early 20th century masters. They did not simply copy existing works. They invented entirely new ones, paintings that had supposedly been lost, stolen, or simply undiscovered, complete with false provenance documents, aged canvas, authentic period pigments sourced from antique shops, and staged family photographs showing the works hanging in old parlor rooms to suggest long family ownership. Auction houses sold them, galleries showed them. Collectors paid tens of millions of euros for them. Beltracchi claimed to have sold over 300 forgeries in total. He was only caught because one of his paintings was analyzed under high-powered spectroscopy, and a single pigment, titanium white, was found to contain a compound that was not manufactured before 1921. The painting was supposedly from 1914. That microscopic anachronism unraveled a 30-year criminal enterprise. The story of John Maillet and John Drewe is different in character but equally staggering in scale. Maillet was a struggling artist and teacher in England who began painting imitation artworks in the style of Picasso, Giacometti, Le Corbusier, and others, initially selling them honestly as what he called genuine fakes. Then Drewe entered the picture. Drewe was not an artist, he was a con man with a genius for paperwork. He understood something that forensic scientists understand too, that the provenance of an artwork, the paper trail proving its history of ownership, is often just as important as the painting itself. Drewe infiltrated the archives of major London institutions, including the Tate Gallery and the Victoria and Albert Museum. He inserted fabricated catalogue entries, photographs, and exhibition records into legitimate historical files. He created an entirely fictional paper history for dozens of Maillet's paintings. When investigators finally caught them in 1995, Scotland Yard called it the biggest art fraud of the 20th century. Over 200 forged works had entered the market. Some are still unaccounted for, sitting in collections around the world whose owners have no idea they paid for something painted in a kitchen in Staffordshire. The forensic tools that have developed to fight these schemes read like something from a science fiction novel. X-ray fluorescence analysis can identify the precise elemental composition of paint pigments down to trace quantities invisible to the naked eye. Infrared reflectography allows conservators to see beneath the surface of a painting, revealing the underdrawing that genuine old masters left behind, and the absence of which is a damning signal in supposed antiques. Dendrochronology can date the wooden panels used as supports by analyzing tree ring patterns, cross-referencing them against regional databases that span hundreds of years. Carbon-14 dating can place organic materials within decades, enough to conclusively disprove a claim that something was made before synthetic compounds existed. Raman spectroscopy identifies molecular structures in pigments, exposing synthetic ultramarine blue in a painting supposedly made before 1826. The year it was invented, or chrome yellow in a canvas claimed to predate its first industrial synthesis. But science alone does not catch forgers. Sometimes it takes an accident, a boast, or a grudge. Elmer Dahori was the most celebrated forger of the mid-20th century, a Hungarian immigré who could dash off a credible Picasso or Matisse in an afternoon. He lived lavishly on the proceeds, selling through dealers who did not ask too many questions, moving through Paris, New York, Miami, and eventually settling on the island of Ibiza. Clifford Irving, the same journalist who would later fabricate a biography of Howard Hughes, exposed Dahori in a 1969 book. And suddenly, the art world was faced with the uncomfortable reality that hundreds of his works had passed through reputable dealers and landed in serious collections. Dahori maintained to the end that the establishment deserved what it got. He cheated people, he said, who were too in love with a famous name to look carefully at what was actually in front of them. That is perhaps the most persistent truth running through every major forgery case. The fraud succeeds not because forgers are flawless, but because buyers, curators, and experts allow prestige and desire to override careful scrutiny. The brain sees what it expects to see. When a well-documented provenance lands on a specialist's desk alongside a painting that superficially resembles the attributed master, the psychological pull toward authentication is powerful. Mark Landys exploited this not for profit, but apparently out of a strange compulsion. For over 30 years, sometimes dressed as a Jesuit priest, sometimes as a retired art teacher, Landys donated fake paintings to dozens of American museums, many of which accepted and displayed them without proper testing. He never asked for money. He simply wanted to be seen as a generous benefactor. He was discovered by a museum registrar who became suspicious after encountering his donations at multiple institutions and ran the provenance strings backward until they dissolved. Forensic art investigation has become its own discipline, with dedicated laboratories at institutions like the Getty Conservation Institute and the Winterthur Museum. Investigators now compile databases of known forgers' materials and techniques, allowing them to flag patterns across cases that span decades and continents. Isotope analysis of lead pigments can trace the geographic origin of the ore used to make lead white, tying a given paint batch to a specific region and era with startling precision. Artificial intelligence systems trained on thousands of authenticated works are beginning to analyze brushstroke dynamics, the micro-variations in pressure and direction that constitute a painter's physical signature, and that a forger, no matter how talented, cannot perfectly replicate across an entire body of fabricated work. Han van Meegeren's unmasking came not from any of these technologies, but from a scandal he created himself. After the war, Dutch authorities discovered that one of his forged Vermeers had been sold to Herman Goering. Facing charges of collaboration with the Nazis for selling Dutch cultural patrimony to the enemy, van Meegeren confessed to the forgery in order to save himself from a far worse sentence. To prove it, he painted a new Vermeer in his prison cell while investigators watched. He died of a heart attack just weeks after sentencing. He had been convicted not of fraud but of forgery, and to many in the Netherlands, he was something of a hero for having tricked the Nazi leadership. The history of art forgery does not end with any single conviction. Beltracchi served less than 4 years and returned to painting under his own name. Mayet became a legitimate artist whose authentic works now sell at a premium, partly because of his notoriety. The forgeries that never surfaced remain embedded in the art market, quiet time bombs waiting for the moment a collector's estate sends a painting to auction, and a conservator runs the numbers and finds something wrong. The art world still has far more faith in its eyes than in the laboratory. And that is exactly the condition that every great forger has relied upon from the beginning. The irony is that the most effective deterrent is not spectroscopy or dendrochronology, but simple institutional humility. The willingness to admit that desire, reputation, and the seduction of a great name can cloud the judgment of even the most experienced curator. Every forger who spent decades inside the walls of the most prestigious institutions in the world got there not because the technology to stop them did not exist, but because no one in a position of authority wanted to believe that something beautiful and supposedly significant could also be a lie. That is a human problem, and it is the one that science